Welcome to the Miracles Happen Fertility podcast, where it's all about using the power of your mind to create hope, health, and miracles on your fertility journey. And now your host, a dash of science and a heap of spirit, Dr. Maria Rothenberger.
Hey there, welcome to the Miracles Happen Fertility podcast. This is Dr. Maria Rothenberger, your host for the podcast, and I am a therapist and coach and psychic medium, all things related to baby, family building, all that kind of stuff. Also, living child-free stuff, which I think is a beautiful way to resolve fertility struggles. Today, I want to talk about adoption and what adoption is really like. As you might know or not know, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, I consider our fertility struggles resolved well before we even had babies in our arms. And that's a long story in my book, Transcending Infertility, which is also turning 1 this month, November 2021. It was published last year, November 2020. And I chronicle the adoption process, our fertility issues, and our adoption of our first son. And it is miraculous and beautiful and an amazing story. And I actually want to read a little bit of it from the book. But I also today want to talk about the things that are really fucking hard about adoption, because it isn't all beautiful. Just like the story of fertility issues when you finally get pregnant, carry to term, have a healthy baby, or you choose to live child-free. There's all the struggle leading up to it. There's the beauty of the miraculous, and then there's all the struggle after it and the beauty and the miraculous. It's all sort of in the mix together. But I want to be clear that adoption is freaking hard, not just the journey to, baby, but for baby too. For children that are adopted, it is a huge loss. And so I wanted to talk about the realities of that a little bit, because I do find that it's important to make informed decisions when you move forward on your family building journey or any decision making, right? I might be a psychic medium, sort of up in the clouds, connected to spirit and things, but I am absolutely well grounded on this planet as well. And we have to live in bodies as humans, making everyday decisions as well as big non-everyday decisions, like whether or not we should move forward with adoption. But first, just to celebrate National Adoption Month, which is why I want to do this podcast episode. November in the U.S. is National Adoption Month. I just wanted to review an excerpt from Transcending Infertility, which you can find at transcendinginfertilitybook.com or on Amazon, #1 bestseller. Yay! And just to read you briefly about our little story of when our first son, came home. So I'm just going to start off in the middle of this section here called, the section is called 317, about the magic of numbers, which is another episode I plan on doing in the future. Anyway, so I'm going to start off here. And just a quick preface, in this part of the book, we had just learned that we had to switch from the Korea adoption program to the China program, and I was absolutely devastated. The beginning of this section is called 317. If you'll recall where we left off on the path to adoption, T and I had switched to the China program. At this point, I was heavily practiced at listening to my intuition. I looked all over the place for signs that I was on the right track. I was getting very good at listening to the nuances of my body and feelings, looking outward and being curious about the answers coming my way. I saw synchronicities all over the place. Hey, I might say, I was literally just thinking of a hummingbird, and there one is. Over the last year or so, I kept seeing the numbers 3, 1, and 7 all over the place. I would see them on license plates, football scores, gas prices. There were endless places they would keep showing up. I even laughingly pulled them out of a fortune cookie once. I had no real idea why those numbers kept showing up, and I was not into numerology or anything remotely similar. I only knew they were significant to me because T's birthday is March 17th. It's a giant celebration on the East Coast where everyone celebrates St. Patrick's Day along with T. There's an abundance of corned beef and cabbage, and most everyone dons something green. When I moved to the East Coast, I could no longer get away with claiming I was safe because I had green eyes. I had to wear green or else. One day, T suggested I play the lottery since I kept referencing seeing 3, 1, and 7 everywhere. I laughed. I'd never played the lottery before, but when the opportunity to get a ticket presented itself, I took it. We were at a Christmas party at the neighbor's house, and we were playing a white elephant game. If you don't know what that is, Google it. It's super fun. There were 3 sets of lottery tickets going around the room, and there was one set that had more trades left. So when my turn came up, I, quote, stole those lottery tickets from someone, thinking, why not? The next morning, when T was in the kitchen brewing coffee, I decided to scratch off my lottery tickets. There were a couple of tickets with a few dollars worth of winnings. Score! I giggled to myself that this had to be what 317 meant. I scratched off the final lottery ticket. I looked at the results, looked at the rules of the game, looked back at the results, looked back at the rules. Then I said loud enough for T to hear me in the kitchen, "Hon, I think I just won $5,000. "Get out of here," came the reply in a thick New Jersey accent. "No, really, I think I won $5,000 on this lottery ticket." He came into the room. "Let me see that." He looked at the results, read the rules, looked at the results, read the rules, and said, "Holy shit, I think you just won $5,000. After a few minutes of laughing uncontrollably and dancing around in the living room, I read how to claim my prize. Only then did I notice the name of the specific game printed on the ticket. Happy birthday. March 17th was important after all. As I said, I was living off my intuition now. No matter what, I knew I could pay attention to my gut. So many other things went my way without having to think through the steps. I began to trust that all would be well, no matter what avenue I took. I learned to pay attention to every feeling that came my way, even if everything in my world pointed to the opposite being the truth. It was like looking at the resume of someone and seeing how great they looked on paper, but when you meet them, there's just something that isn't quite right. When I have the isn't quite right feeling, I get curious about it and typically pause before making a decision. On the other hand, if there are blemishes on paper, but my gut feeling is one of complete and total ease, I typically move forward toward the sensation of total ease. As such, I went through my days following through with the required adoption documentation for the China program, yet I had an inkling, a knowing that our baby was in Korea. I can't explain it other than to say it was a strong intuition. It felt easy, it felt calm, and I knew I simply had to pay attention to whatever was in my path to let me know that was where we were headed. I recalled one particularly pensive, now incredibly significant, morning on my way to the office when I looked squarely at a sign with the Korean alphabet, Hangul, on it. It was a sign for a Korean church I must have passed several hundred times. I believe I knew there was a church on the corner, but I only now recognized the Hangul since I had been learning all about Korea for many months. As I passed by the sign, I felt as if I were in a dream. Next to the sign was a mailbox with the street numbers painted in white, 317. After I picked my jaw up off the floor, I took this as an absolute sign from the universe that our baby was on the way from Korea. I didn't know how that was to happen, but I knew that I was to trust it. I was to trust that miracles happen, and I need not do a thing but be open and wait. And I did. I had total faith that the universe had our back. We need only be grateful and open to the gifts that were to come. 1 month later, on a gorgeous spring day in May, the gift came. Below is what I wrote in my blog on that unforgettable day. Titled, "We Interrupt This Zen Moment," to bring you earth-shattering, life-altering news in a good way. That's basically what I heard yesterday after having received a phone call from our agency's director during my hike with the dogs. I usually take them hiking once a week to let them run free and to commune with nature. It's totally zen and I love it. So I'm walking along, listening to birds chirp and watching the dogs be in the moment when the ring of my phone marred those lovely sounds of nature. I bring my phone with me as a just-in-case kind of thing because I got lost hiking once. Thankfully, my dog got me out of there. Animals are awesome. I didn't recognize the number, so I didn't answer it and was actually surprised to hear the familiar ping letting me know there was a voicemail. I picked it up, and that's when my zen was entirely disrupted. The director said something to the effect of, "We have an urgent situation and I need you to call me as soon as possible." Shit, is what I thought. What else? Now we're not eligible for China either? Obviously, I called back immediately. She asked if I was sitting. I told her I was hiking, but I'd find a rock. And I did. She then proceeded to tell me the craziest thing ever. A family just had their adopted son escorted from Korea last Friday, and they aren't doing well. For privacy reasons, I won't go into detail, but basically they don't want to finalize the adoption. And our agency is asking us to adopt him. We have to decide by today, and he would need to be placed with us by Friday. Yeah, thank God I was sitting. We're scared shitless and nervous and feeling crazy and overwhelmed. We have nothing. No car seat, no toddler food, no toys, no bath stuff, no nursery setup, no outlet covers, nothing. Zilch, nada. But we have love. We have a lot of love. Come to think of it, the whole scary, nervous, crazy, overwhelmed thing, that sounds a lot like we're preparing for another IVF. We know how to do that. Are you up for a wild ride? I think we are. Now it's your turn to pick up your jaw from the floor. I'm assuming you caught the part about this little boy having been born in Korea. Suddenly, the $5,000 lottery ticket is like chump change, am I right? As much as I wholeheartedly trusted that the universe provides and we need only wait for the gifts, this bit of news absolutely blew my mind. I'm pretty sure I ended the call a blabbering mess, somehow conveying I should probably run it by T first, but every part of me was screaming, yes, we want this baby. It isn't even a question. T wasn't living in my Zen space. He brought me right back down to earth with all his stupidly practical questions like, how can we do this? We have no help. We didn't even give clients/work notice. We don't have anything for our baby. We don't even have a space for him to sleep in. Well, damn. Bye-bye, winded my sails. He was right. And for a good few hours, I felt terrified. I'd let my mind wander back along with T's to the space of needing to control the universe. I needed to have ducks in a row, and I needed to know how every step was going to go along the way. After a few hours of that, I realized I'd traveled right back to where my brain had been completely unsuccessful for many years. In short, I was being an idiot. I began to collaborate with T on the possibility of saying yes to this adoption opportunity, knowing full well this was our son. There was no doubt in my mind. But T's mind didn't work like mine, and we were a team. Once I realized I was being an idiot, I simply stayed there with T while his brain processed this hugely miraculous news, and process he did. It's kind of funny to me now how he accepted the $5,000 lottery win much faster. At the end of all the processing and with a few hours to spare, we called the agency and told them we were freaked the fuck out and we couldn't wait to meet our son. I'd been carefully chronicling our journey on my blog called From If to When, and I couldn't wait to announce the long-awaited arrival of our family member number 3. It was an astounding and miraculous experience, and we'll never forget a second of it. Still, it's fun to read through the details. Here's that post. At 11:48 a.m. on May 25th, 2012, our lives changed forever. 8 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days since applying to adopt. After we waited with bated breath for the bank to open, got some documents notarized, emailed them to the agency's director, and did some last-minute shopping, we got the phone call from the social worker that she would be arriving in 45 minutes. Our hearts stopped. Could this really be happening? Like, seriously? When the social worker showed up, I frantically tried to put the battery back in the camera so we could get some shots, and T was outside cleaning off the porch yelling, "They're here, Maria, they're here!" My neighbor happened to be outside when they drove up, saw him, and started crying. We've been waiting so long for this. She went through infertility as well and had twins via IVF, and she knows all about our story. Then T and I saw him, an absolute angel, and we knew he was ours. I'm going to end that here by talking about and reiterating how absolutely magical that experience was. And it is all true. All of the trusting the universe, all looking for signs, all having a knowing that our baby was in Korea, and then having him show up in such a miraculous, unconventional way. The same thing happened with our second son. Briefly, we had applied for domestic adoption. We were going to adopt through the foster care system in Oregon. It just so happens the agency that we adopted from in New Jersey is based out of Eugene, Oregon. And because of that, we were able to look into foster care adoption. That is, adopting from the foster care system. So we filled out the paperwork. We did all the training, which, mind you, is overwhelming and quite scary. And I'm a therapist. I specialize in kids. It was really, they give you the absolute honest truth, as they should. So we go through all this training, and for whatever reason, I'm still living in this space of going with my gut. There was just a pause. There was something that I needed to pause with and not move forward. I needed to not move forward for some reason. I didn't know what that was. So all the while, I'm thinking, it would be amazing to have, we have this interracial family. We're white. Our son's Asian. It would be beautiful if we could have another Asian child, and even more amazing if that child could be Korean. Also, I've always wanted two boys, and we were looking to adopt a girl. My husband wanted a girl, but I just kept feeling this knowing of having another boy who's Korean. Now, I knew full well that we were not going to apply for Korean adoption again. It's mind-blowingly expensive, and it makes sense. I mean, they have a beautiful foster care system in Korea and healthcare, medical care. It's wonderful, and it goes to a great place. But we had spent so much money on fertility stuff, and we had just moved. That cost a lot of money. Miraculously, another miraculous thing that I didn't even mention in the book about adopting O is that because he was already, all of his adoption fees were already paid for with the first family, we only had to pay a small fraction of that in order to adopt him. Absolute miraculous. Otherwise, we were looking at $40,000+. We weren't going to apply for Korean adoption again because of that. We just didn't want to do that. And foster care adoption is far less expensive. So we sat and sat and sat. And then one day, I get a phone call from the adoption agency. They had talked to the social workers in New Jersey with the same company asking about us. And they apparently said such beautiful things about our family that they called us directly and said, we have a situation. Almost exactly like what we experienced with O, except much harder. So this child had been in the home. He was adopted from Korea. He had been in the home for a year, more than a year, and was really not doing well. And again, for the sake of privacy, I will just say that it was a very similar experience, except this time we flew out to where he was and took custody there. And he is now a beautiful, thriving little boy with his brother, and drives us crazy. Like all kids drive their parents crazy sometimes. And it's another miraculous story because A, he's a boy. B, he's from Korea. C, we weren't even looking, like we didn't apply for Korean adoption. He was technically a domestic adoption because he was legally an American. He was legally adopted already. So it was technically a domestic adoption. It's amazing. I mean, I'm leaving out so many details, so many miraculous details that it's so hard to imagine that this is real, but it is. And I am not an anomaly here. You are welcome to the same kinds of miracles in your life. That's why my business is called Miracles Happen, because they freaking do. Okay. So the miracles are there. The amazingness is there. The joyfulness is there. The laughter, the brightness, the light. Let's talk about the darkness, okay? Because again, I want you to have this balanced point of view. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. In fact, when we were picking up our second son, there was some problems with paperwork, and we were there much longer than we thought we were going to be there. And then my husband and older son went home. So it was just me and the little guy, B. And I had a major meltdown. I didn't know it at the time, but I was having a major sort of panic that I was triggered by the fertility experience, fertility struggles. When you are at that place where you're doing all the things that you need to do and there's just literally nothing that you can do, but you're still stuck, I felt all of that all over again. The difference is that in the past, I would have stayed in that triggered state for weeks and weeks. But once I realized what was happening, it took about a day. Once I realized what was happening, I still felt sad and stuck and not like okay being there, but I was not in that full-blown like meltdown panic. Like I wouldn't even pick up the phone for my husband. I was like, I can't talk to anybody. I can barely breathe right now. I felt so terrible. I was hiding in the bathroom because I didn't want my new son to see me so upset when he's dealing with so much grief. Okay, that's my experience. Let's talk about the kiddos. So I think that people forget, especially your loved ones, when you are adopting, they forget that yes, this is a beautiful, joyous experience, but it comes with so much loss on the part of these children. So they lose all that they know. Even if it's not a great situation, they lose everything that they know, that everything that is familiar. Now think about that. Use your 5 senses. Everything that they hear that's familiar, see that's familiar, smell that's familiar, taste that's familiar. Everything around them is unfamiliar, and they have no choice. It's all just taken from them. I can barely handle thinking about that right now. It just makes me really emotional because it's so much loss for them that they can't even express. So now they're in this new space, and we as new parents are also adjusting, and we have expectations for what they're going to eat, how they're going to dress, what they're going to listen to during the day, what nap time is, when nap time is, what time bedtime is, when we eat dinner together, what we eat. The physical space that they're in is different than where they were. They don't have all of their belongings that they had. And we still hold these expectations for them. I remember something that's really common in adoption is that kids frequently look for food, whether it's a comfort thing or they didn't have as much food when they were in foster care or in whatever situation that they were in. But food is comfort. So it's especially if you're adopting a toddler or, a little bit older child, you can just give them a backpack with their own food or their own like food treasure chest that they can keep in their room, because it's a source of comfort for them, and you can just fill it up for them. I remember one time I wasn't even in that space. Had lost sleep, all adjustment stuff. And my youngest wanted another snack. Like he'd just eaten lunch and had another snack after that. And he wanted another snack. And I wasn't thinking. Now, normally I'd be like, oh yeah, here's your shelf full of snacks, or here's your backpack full of snacks, eat whatever you want. I was not thinking. And therefore I said no. And he looked at me with these big puppy dog eyes and just started bawling. Now, it's the kind of bawling that's not like tantrumy, like, but I want it. I want the thing. It was such profound, deep grief that I dropped what I was doing. I went over to him. I picked him up and held him, and he just sobbed, crocodile tears coming out. They just wouldn't stop. He was shaking. Something in him was triggered to the point of inconsolability. I started crying with him. We sat rocking on the floor, just grieving deeply. And these are those kinds of moments that you can expect with adoption. Other kiddos present differently. They regress to infancy, for example, so they'll need a bottle or a pacifier or these kinds of things that a small infant might need. If you adopt a newborn, there's still trauma there, let alone just birth trauma, but trauma being taken away from birth parents, especially birth mom and her familiar sounds and voice and scent. All of that is still so difficult for the baby. So being able to mimic that as much as possible. I mean, we adopted a puppy recently, and the blanket that he had when he was with his litter mates, they, brought home. We got to bring home with him because it's a familiar scent and texture and sight. So why wouldn't we do that for human babies, right? It's the same idea. It's such a traumatic experience to be ripped from all that you know, even if the new space is comfortable and the people are kind and you're treated well. It's still so much grief. In fact, when you see this deep grief, crazy deep grief happen, it's usually because there is felt safety. So now they feel safe enough to express the grief. With my oldest, the grief was around sleep. He did not want to sleep. He was kind of cranky all the time because of that. He didn't like certain textures and sounds like the bath. He hated. I put some photos up on Instagram, on social media recently about with a bath photo, because it's one of my favorites because it was the first time he really enjoyed a bath. We had to really work up to that. My husband, T, put him in the sink with some toys and he just stood there. He didn't even want to sit down. But when he saw the toys, so he started playing with them and it became easier and easier. Then he began associating the sounds and the scents and the feel of the bubbles and the toys in the water with something pleasant. And then he was able to take a bath, right? So these are the things that you have to work through with adoption, especially of older children, but certainly with infants as well. Now, this is a closed adoption situation. Our two boys are closed adoptions. That means that we have no contact with their birth parents or their former families. Now, I'm able to send updates to the adoption agency, both domestically and overseas in South Korea, in case birth families or former families want to learn about them, but it's certainly not mandatory. They're just kept on file. And I send updates to the foster families who usually pick them up because they're so in love with these kids. They housed them and fed them and cared so much for them before they were adopted. And then we get photos back of them receiving their gifts and the letters and stuff. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So therein is the combination of the hard times and the beautiful times. We also love sharing their stories with them. We love talking to our kids about how they came to be in this family. And it's still hard. It's still hard because when a kid, especially as they get older, they start learning about other family dynamics and their friends and how they came to be in their families, whether it's they live with their birth families or they were adopted. We are so fortunate. We have a lot of adoption in this area and a lot of racial diversity, and it's so amazing. So they're exposed to a lot and they don't feel totally anomalous, but it is still a hard conversation to have, and it's one to honor and to be delicate about. So in this episode, I want to honor the beauty of adoption and the pain of adoption. I want to honor both. I do this because both things that are seemingly opposing can exist at the same time. And I feel also that the pain of adoption makes the beauty that much more rich, that much more valuable, because you know that the pain is there and the beauty is there. And I just don't think that it would be as rich and full of depth and meaning without both being there. This is exactly how I feel, by the way, about fertility issues. Without that pain, the light wouldn't shine as bright. The beauty of this experience wouldn't shine as bright. The fact that you're closer to your spouse wouldn't shine as bright. The fact that you're more emotionally intelligent wouldn't shine as bright. The fact that you listen to your intuition more wouldn't shine as bright. And on and on and on. I would love to hear your list of the things that have come out because of your pain on this journey. If you have an adoption story to tell too, I would absolutely love to hear that. You can email me your story anytime, info@drmariarothenberger.com. It might take me a little while to get back to you, but I will personally get back to you. I love hearing others' stories. Okay, with that, I want to honor National Adoption Month, and I'm just going to call it National Gratitude Month for Thanksgiving if you are here in the States. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. And if you are so inclined, I would love to have a rating from you, so star rating or an actual comment on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast from. I really appreciate you. Also, I didn't make this announcement at the beginning. I normally make announcements at the beginning of this podcast, but this month only, beginning on November 19th for 2 weeks, we are celebrating Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and the 1-year anniversary of Transcending Infertility by offering a free PDF version of Transcending Infertility if you sign up for the Miracles Happen membership. 3-month commitment, and you just head over to drmariarothenberger.com/member for more information on that. All right. Wishing you so much happiness and joy and lots of miracles in with the chaos and the crazy and the hard stuff wherever you are on your family building journey. And until next time, be well.